Sudan is on the edge. The United Nations has called it the world's worst humanitarian crisis. Entire cities lie in ruins, famine grips millions, and the country's future hangs by a thread. The numbers alone are staggering. Around 30 million people have been forced from their homes. Nearly 30 million face extreme hunger, with famine already declared in several regions. In Sudan, lives have been shattered by a war that shows no sign of ending. And at the center of this catastrophe stands one man, a figure who rose from the dusty trade routes of Darfur to become Sudan's most feared commander. His name is Mohamed Hamdan Dagalo, but the world knows him as Hemedti. With little schooling and no political background, Hemedti built his rapid support forces into a paramilitary empire that rivals Sudan's army and now stands at the heart of the country's chaos. In this episode of African Biographics, we'll trace Hemedti's path from his humble beginnings to his grip on power. We'll uncover how fortunes made from gold and foreign alliances fueled his rise, how his war has put Sudan into a proxy struggle with global stakes, and how he's building a rival state. Hemedti was born in Darfur, Sudan, sometime between 1973 and 1975. His family belonged to the Rizagat, a camel-herding tribe whose life revolved around the desert, trade routes, and the constant struggle against hunger and drought. School ended early for him, around the 3rd grade. He could read little and write a little, but most of his lessons came from the caravans in the desert. With long days on the road, sleeping under the stars, watching deals made and sometimes stolen. Then came the ambush. Armed men attacked his family caravan, killing dozens of relatives and clansmen, seizing camels and goods. What was left was grief, humiliation, and a choice: accept it or fight back. Like many young men with no state protection, Hemedti drifted into local self-defense bands. Those groups hardened into the Janjaweed, a loose coalition of Arab fighters who would soon become infamous. By 2003, their name carried terror. Armed, funded, and unleashed by al-Bashir, Sudan's longtime dictator, they became the regime's shock troops against rebel groups like the Four, Masalit, and Zagawa. Villages were burned, families fled into the desert, and entire communities were erased. Within this horror, Hemedti rose. Loyal to his kin and tribesmen, ruthless to his enemies, and quick to see opportunity, he climbed from camel trader to field commander. People called him effective, others feared him. One attack sealed his reputation. In November 2004, fighters under his command stormed the village of Adwa. Witnesses described mass executions, women rounded up, girls assaulted in front of their families. This brutal efficiency caught al-Bashir's eye. By 2013, still fighting rebellions and running short on loyal forces, the president carved out a new unit from the Janjaweed's most effective fighters. He called it the Rapid Support Forces and put Hemedti in charge. At first, the RSF answered to Sudan's intelligence services, but its role grew fast and it encompassed crushing rebels in Darfur, patrolling borders, and even taking counter-insurgency missions. In 2015, the RSF was legalized as a regular force, and by 2017, it had its own budget, command, and direct reporting lines to the president. al-Bashir had built a parallel army, but not one loyal to him. The RSF was loyal to Hemedti. Hemedti expanded recruitment, built financial networks, and consolidated power. Now, building a paramilitary force on the scale of the RSF required more than weapons and recruits. It required money, and for Hemedti, that lifeline was gold. When South Sudan broke away in 2011, Sudan lost most of its oil reserves. The economic shock was severe. But almost at the same time, new gold deposits were discovered, especially in North Darfur's Jebel Amir region. The discovery of gold in Jebel Amir brought sudden wealth to the previously peripheral region of North Darfur. By 2012, Gold had overtaken oil as Sudan's biggest export, and by 2017, control of most mines in North Darfur had shifted to the RSF under Hemedti. While gold extraction remained mostly artisanal, the RSF-related al-Junaid company took control of the processing of gold tailings as well as gold exports from the region. From that point, Hemedti was at the center of Sudan's gold trade, a position that gave him immense influence and wealth. His brother Abdul Rahim, who now serves as his deputy in the RSF, ran al-Junaid, a family company active in mining, transport, and other sectors. Investigations by groups such as Global Witness and Reuters have shown that al-Junaid became a key vehicle for channeling money and resources into the RSF. For the RSF, gold was only one stream of revenue. In 2015, the RSF began sending thousands of fighters abroad, most notably to Yemen, where they joined the Saudi and Emirati-led campaign against the Houthis. These deployments brought in significant payments and deepened Hemedti's ties to Gulf powers. This financial independence gave the RSF unusual autonomy. Unlike Sudan's regular army, they could raise funds directly, equip themselves, and operate without depending on state budgets. The RSF poured money into mobility and firepower. Instead of tanks, they relied on convoys of Toyota pickups converted into fighting vehicles. Cheap, fast, and deadly, these technicals became the RSF's trademark. Reports suggest that large numbers of these vehicles were purchased from Gulf dealers, sometimes in bulk. They appeared first in Darfur's arid landscapes, then emerged in what was at the time the vibrant heart of Khartoum, Sudan's capital. By early 2019, Sudan was open in revolt. For months, the streets filled with massive protests against Omar al-Bashir. It was a genuine uprising, broadly based and relentless, demanding change after decades of authoritarian rule. Hemedti saw the shift and made his move. After years of serving Bashir, he turned on him. When Omar al-Bashir was arrested in April 2019 amid mass protests, Hemedti swiftly aligned himself with the new power structure. He became deputy head of the Transitional Military Council, leveraging his control over the RSF to consolidate influence. Soon after Hemedti secured a seat on the Sovereignty Council, the joint civilian-military body tasked with guiding Sudan toward democracy. Hemedti appeared at peace talks, shook hands with the rebels, and began presenting himself as a national figure, even a statesman. But the RSF remained the real power behind him. Then came June 3, 2019. In Khartoum, a peaceful sit-in was crushed by force. Witnesses and rights groups pointed to RSF fighters who opened fire, killed more than 100, assaulted women, and threw bodies into the Nile. Hemedti denied ordering the crackdown, insisting rogue elements were responsible. But this was not the first time. Years earlier, during campaigns in Darfur, such as Operation Decisive Summer in 2014 and 2015, entire villages were burned, civilians executed, women assaulted, and homes looted. These tactics of terror had already and their Janjaweed predecessors their reputation. The massacre in Khartoum showed that the same methods had been carried into the heart of the capital. Anyways, after the fall of Omar al-Bashir, Hemedti and General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, head of the Sudanese armed forces, became uneasy allies. They ran the transitional government together, but mistrust simmered. In 2021, Burhan launched a coup that sidelined civilians. Hemedti supported it at first, but later criticized the move. It was a clear sign that their partnership was fraying. The breaking point came over the question of integrating Hemedti's RSF into the army. On paper, it was a structural reform. In reality, it was about power. General Burhan and the SAF demanded full absorption of the RSF under army command. For Hemedti, that would mean losing everything: his autonomy, his financial networks, and his direct control over fighters. Neither side would yield, and the standoff grew into a countdown. On April 15, 2023, it exploded. Fighting erupted in Khartoum with shocking intensity. Tanks, artillery, airstrikes, and street battles turned the capital into a war zone overnight. The army was eventually forced to relocate its headquarters to Port Sudan on the Red Sea. Khartoum, the capital, had become a battleground in the brutal conflict between the Sudanese armed forces and the RSF. As tanks roared through the streets and airstrikes pounded the neighborhoods, the RSF gained control over key parts of Khartoum, making it untenable for the SAF to operate from its traditional command center. Since the outbreak of the war, Sudan is now effectively split between two rival forces, the RSF and the Sudanese armed forces, each controlling distinct regions and resources. The RSF holds sway over most of Darfur, parts of Khartoum, and strategic southern areas rich in gold and trade routes. These zones not only provide financial lifelines through gold mining and smuggling, but also connect the RSF to regional allies and supply chains. Despite losing full control of Khartoum in early 2025, the RSF maintains a strong presence in surrounding districts and continue to challenge SAF dominance. Meanwhile, the SAF controls the northern and eastern parts of the country, including Port Sudan on the Red Sea, which has now become its de facto capital. This division of Sudan has hardened into a geographic and political split, with each side entrenching its position and complicating efforts toward national reconciliation or a unified government. Hemedti's RSF has even gone further, declaring its own governing structures and signaling its ambition to function as a state within the state. But more on this a little bit later. Since the war erupted in April 2023, the atrocities have not slowed, they have multiplied. The death toll in the war is staggering. Some estimates put it at tens of thousands, while others go as high as 450,000 lives lost. And displacement has reached historic levels. Sudan now faces the largest displacement crisis in the world. More than 13 million people have been forced from their homes. Entire towns have been emptied, families scattered across borders, and futures destroyed. Sexual violence has become a recurring weapon in the conflict. Survivors speak of assaults, abductions, and cases of forced marriages. At the same time, both the RSF and the army stand accused of blocking aid. The result is worsening famine in a country where millions already live on the brink of starvation. Torture has been reported on both sides, and the scale of human suffering is almost impossible to grasp. Then came the word that changes everything: genocide. On January 7, 2025, the United States officially accused Hemedti and the RSF of committing genocide in Darfur. The charge centered on the systematic targeting of non-Arab communities, especially the Masalit and the Zagawa. Hemedti's RSF has been accused of following a racist Arab supremacist ideology, which has fueled its campaign of violence against non-Arab communities in Darfur. These attacks, marked by mass killings, sexual violence, and forced displacement, are seen not just as military tactics, but as part of a deliberate effort to reshape the region's ethnic makeup. The evidence is disturbing. Camps that were meant to be places of safety have instead turned into sites of violence. For instance, in April 2024, the Zamzam camp, once meant to be a refuge, was turned into a scene of devastation. More than 100 people were killed, and thousands who had already lost everything were forced to flee again. A year later, in April 2025, the Abu Shouk camp came under attack. This time, at least 40 lives were cut short. Hemedti's RSF insisted that these camps were not civilian at all, claiming they were military zones and bases for resistance. But survivors and aid groups reject that as a fabrication. They describe the camps as civilian spaces filled with women, children, and the elderly. Observers describe a grim pattern that resembles what they call a template for genocide. So how does Hemedti and the RSF keep this war going? How does a militia that turned itself into a rival government sustain a fight against Sudan's national army, even while much of the world condemns it? Well, the answer, many analysts argue, lies outside of Sudan. The war in Sudan has become a proxy conflict tied into a wider web of alliances and rivalries. And right at the center of that web is the United Arab Emirates. For over a decade, the UAE has been Sudan's largest official buyer of gold, importing $2.3 billion worth in 2022 alone. Independent experts, including the UN, estimate that up to 80 to 90% of Sudan's gold is smuggled out of the country. Much of this illicit gold ends up in Dubai, fueling private networks and armed groups. Among the biggest beneficiaries is Hemedti's RSF, which has used gold revenues to finance its military operations, purchase weapons, and sustain its war effort. It is not only gold that has raised eyebrows. Multiple reports from the UN, Amnesty International, and investigative journalists have alleged that weapons shipments have moved through Chad and other neighboring states, with some linked back to Emirati supply networks. But the UAE is not the only outside player. Russia has also been accused of fueling conflict. The network stretches further still. In Libya, Warlord Khalifa Haftar has reportedly offered bases and resupply routes to the RSF. His ties with both the UAE and Hemedti create a triangle of convenience built on gold, guns, and mutual interests. Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia has tilted towards Sudan's regular army under General Burhan, while Egypt has also thrown its weight behind the SAF to secure its southern border. Both countries deny direct involvement in the fighting, but analysts say their influence shapes the balance of power. Reports have even suggested that some Sudanese gold has slipped across Egypt's border, feeding into the same shadow economy that sustains the war. And then there's Turkey. On one hand, Ankara has supplied Burhan's army with its formidable drones, the same drones that have shifted the balance of power on battlefields in Ukraine. The strikes from the Turkish drones have given the Sudanese army a crucial edge against Hemedti's forces. On the other hand, Turkish President Erdogan has tried to position his country as a mediator, offering to broker peace between Khartoum and the UAE. Around the edges are Sudan's immediate neighbors, Chad, Ethiopia, and South Sudan, all play a role in the trade routes that crisscross the region. Each contributes to the flow of fighters, goods, or money. By early 2025, Sudan's war had ground to a stalemate. Hemedti no longer controlled Khartoum, but in Darfur, his forces held firm. And it was there, on his home turf, that he made his boldest move yet, which was trying to transform himself from militia commander to a head of a rival state. In April 2025, a coalition emerged, the Sudan Founding Alliance, also known as TASIS. TASIS' charter was signed in Nairobi, Kenya's capital, a decision that set off a diplomatic storm. Sudan's military-backed government in Port Sudan accused Kenya of breaking its promises not to host hostile forces. They pointed to President William Ruto's long-standing ties to Hemedti as evidence of outside interference. Now, at the heart of TASIS is a pact between the RSF and the Sudan People's Liberation Movement North, led by Abdelaziz Al-Hilu. For decades, Al-Hilu's group has battled Khartoum over land and political rights. For Al-Hilu, joining with the RSF signals a broader front against the army, drawing in smaller factions from Darfur and South Kordofan. In July 2025, TASIS unveiled itself to the world in Nyala, the capital of South Darfur. The alliance declared a parallel government with a 15-member presidential council. Hemedti was named its leader, with Al-Hilu as his deputy. A civilian politician from Darfur, Mohamed Hassan al-Taishi, was appointed prime minister. So in effect, Hemedti and TASIS have built a mirror image of the SAF-backed government on the Red Sea. Analysts argue that for Hemedti, TASIS is an attempt to rebrand his RSF and shift the perception from it being a militia accused of atrocities into a political authority seeking recognition. It is a bid for legitimacy and bargaining power in future negotiations, but skepticism remains due to ongoing violence and humanitarian concerns. And so the question remains, where does Sudan go from here, and what future is left for the people caught in this crossfire? Don't forget to like and share the video if you enjoyed it. Thank you all for tuning in. This has been Tatenda for African Biographics. Until next time, cheers. Have a good one.